Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the big news out of Iceland, the EVE Fanfest 2025 keynote.
Yeah, there was a lot announced. We're going to try and unpack it all for you.
Exactly. We'll cover the core EVE Online updates, expansions, but also the newer stuff like EVE Vanguard and EVE Frontier.
It's a whole ecosystem now. So our mission here is basically to sift through all that information and figure out what it really means for you, the players.
Okay, let's start with the heart of it all, EVE Online itself. They really leaned into the history at the start, didn't they?
Oh yeah, celebrating 22 years, which is just incredible for an MMO.
And they mentioned the monument again, the one in Iceland for the first 20 years. Apparently, they're already planning a third section for it.
It makes sense, given how much happens in EVE. And speaking of history, they brought up the player-held Guinness World Records.
Right, 2 of them. And they hinted at maybe going for a third with that whole Great Migration thing recently.
It just shows the scale, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What players can achieve. And that line, the best ship is friendship.
Yeah, even in a game designed for, well, as they put it, total hell, it says a lot about the community.
Definitely. And CCP seems to be leaning into that community focus, especially bringing back proper expansions.
That was announced, 3 years ago? Now they've shipped 5, and they talked about consistency, learning lessons.
And also these regular updates between the big expansions. Seems like they're doing 2 major ones a year now, plus a third planned for this fall.
Yeah, and they mentioned that's heavily driven by CSM feedback, the player council. So iterating on existing stuff based on what players are asking for.
Which seems like a good rhythm. Keeps things moving, addresses issues faster than just waiting for one big drop a year.
One of those big feedback points was force projection, right? Moving fleets around.
Always a hot topic. They said they're working through a roadmap starting with Sino changes.
The aim is safer home networks, but keeping travel risky.
It's a balance, isn't it? Make your home space secure, but you can't just teleport fleets across the map risk-free.
And they mentioned looking at fatigue, ship casters, bridges, filaments, even new structures down the line.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty fundamental look at how power moves across New Eden. It's complex stuff.
Okay, so the next expansion, EVE Legion, that's landing really soon, May 27th.
Right around the corner. And the focus seems to be on players and their organizations, their core and alliances.
Strengthening those relationships, expanding on the Equinox sovereignty system for nullsec, more flexibility, but also new tools for conflict.
Well, it's EVE. You need both, right? Building things up and tearing them down.
True. They also said Legion will polish features from previous releases.
Good to hear. Refining existing systems is just as important as adding new ones.
One big refinement. The map. They're finally tackling a map overhaul, starting at the basics.
Oh, thank goodness.
What?
They even joked about not showing the current map to new players because it's so intense.
Yeah. So, clearer navigation, better filters, more user control. That's the first step.
And plans for more later, like points of interest, system lore, making it more than just a tactical tool.
That could be huge for just exploring and understanding the universe.
Definitely. Another new feature in Legion, and this one sounds really interesting, is Freelance Jobs.
Right, this builds on corporation projects, but lets you take jobs from any court.
Exactly. You can do tasks, get rewards, maybe find a corp you like, get recruited. They see it as a gateway, especially for newer players or returning ones.
It feels like it could bridge the gap between solo play and joining a big group.
And potentially mentor new players, right? Vets could post jobs specifically to help out.
Could it? Could it lead to player-created missions eventually? That seems like the logical next step.
That's the dream for some, isn't it?
Yeah.
Player-generated content on that scale. It's a fascinating possibility.
To help them create content faster, they mentioned the Goldsmith technology.
Yeah, basically tools to make building missions, epic arcs, combat sites, all that stuff, quicker and better on their end.
And they also recommitted to the ESI, the API.
Which is absolutely vital. So many essential third-party tools rely on it. Stankel Gilboard, Pyfa.
They specifically called those out, recognizing how important the community developers are. Focus on stability, empowerment.
Following the success of that Excel add-in they did, it seems they're really embracing third-party development, which is smart.
Core are also getting some cosmetic love, finally. The Corp palette.
Yeah, official color schemes for your corporation. Starts with Freelance Jobs branding, but they want to integrate it into Corp ship skins later.
That could be pretty cool for alliance cohesion, seeing fleets in matching colors.
And the logo editor. Finally getting a proper RGB and hex code picker.
No more fiddling with those awful sliders. A small thing, but quality of life.
Definitely. Identity matters in EVE.
Mm.
These tools help strengthen that.
Speaking of looks, the visual upgrades continue. They're really committed to keeping EVE looking good.
They mentioned the big Trinity graphics engine overhaul they did recently. Performance, fidelity.
And now they're working on renovating the fog system, adding ray trace shadows.
Upscaling support, too, for all major graphics cards. That's nice.
And later this year, a big lighting model upgrade using HDR cube maps for nebulas. That sounds like it could make space look incredible.
Absolutely. And lighting and VFX upgrades for all cruisers, too.
Plus dramatic new damage visualization, particle fire and smoke.
Should make fights look even more visceral. Getting blown up will look better than ever.
Huh. And it's not just effects, they're redesigning 5 Tech 1 cruiser hulls.
And their variants, yeah. So that's what, 13 new ship models in total?
That's a pretty significant refresh for some core ships.
It is. Could shake up some established doctrines, maybe. Keeps things fresh.
Story-wise, the Deathless Saga continues, following up on Revenant.
Still lots of mysteries there. Drifter wormholes, Jovian tech, what the Deathless are actually planning.
Keeps the narrative ticking along, gives context to some of the events.
Exactly. And speaking of systems changing, the Equinox sovereignty stuff from the last expansion is getting iterated on in Legion.
Right. 3 new categories of Someth upgrades.
Yeah, things related to generating colony resources, ship effects within the system like boosting damage or resists maybe.
Gamma and plasma effects, they mentioned. And better exploration upgrades for data and relic sites. New mechanics there.
Adds more strategic choice to how you develop your sauce space. Makes holding territory more interesting.
Plus, the ability to capture enemy skyhooks immediately, though at a reduced cost initially.
That could speed up SOV warfare quite a bit. More dynamic captures, maybe?
They also recap the March update quickly. Tier 3 mining sites, cheaper capital ship construction.
Some UI UX tweaks, and those first force projection changes with the Sinos.
And looking ahead, more balance passes, especially for capital ship roles, making that escalation path clearer.
And more Drifter stuff.
Oh.
Escalating the Drifter Labyrinth in an event called Wrath of Tyrannos.
Sounds ominous. The Drifters aren't going away anytime soon, it seems.
Definitely not. They're a core part of the ongoing mystery.
Okay, but the big crowd pleasers. New ships.
Always. Getting the Babaroga?
The Triglavian Marauder, based on the Leshak Hull, entropic disintegrators, all the usual Marauder siege mode stuff.
It's going to be nasty. An escalating damage Marauder. Wow.
And finally, the Angel Cartel get their Dreadnought, the Azariel class.
Yes. Capital projectile bonuses, and that unique feature. A capital micro jump drive usable while sieged.
That's completely new, isn't it? A sieged dreadnought that can jump.
It is. Huge tactical implications there. Unprecedented mobility for a sieged capital.
That'll certainly change some fleet compositions and strategies.
No doubt about it. 2 very cool, very distinct capital additions.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. The new player experience, or NPE, they talked about a radically different approach.
Leaning into the community was the main theme, which makes sense for Heave.
Building tools and a safety net, basically helping players connect with veterans.
And they see those freelance jobs we talked about as key to that. Engaging new and lapsed players, finding mentors.
It feels like they're acknowledging that the community is often better at teaching new players than any tutorial could be.
Which is probably true. Providing the framework for that interaction seems like the right way to go.
Looking even further ahead, beyond Legion, they tease some future themes.
Yeah, more on Capital's focus on real counterplay. They reduce costs, now maybe focusing on survivability, keeping the subcap meta healthy.
New weapons of war, iterating on things like tethering, structure timers.
And then those concepts like War Engine and Gold Rush.
Right, incentivizing undocking for big rewards. Reworking ownership and conflict, maybe.
Resource gathering is a cornerstone. Dynamic resource distribution, making salvaging worthwhile again.
That Gold Rush concept art looked pretty intense. Lots of ships fighting over resources.
Suggests a move towards more dynamic, emergent conflict drivers, perhaps. Making space feel more alive and contested.
Okay, that covers a lot for EVE Online. Let's move on to the wider ecosystem. EVE Vanguard.
The MMO FPS. Big news here. Early access launch target is summer 2026.
On Steam and the EVE launcher, but you can play it much sooner.
Yeah, playable this September during the Nemesis event, kicking off September 16th.
They're really pushing this as a true MMO FPS, integrated into New Eden. Persistent power, wealth, progression.
Social connections, real impact on the main EVE Online universe. That's the ambitious part.
They teased Vanguard Bastions for the dedicated Vanguard Keynote and showed off new war clone suits focused on adaptability.
And the weapon design. inspired by late 90s, early 2000s shooters, aiming for fun, unique feel. Quake, Halo vibes, maybe.
They rattled off a ton of features coming, too.
Yeah.
NPCs, commissions, personal war barges.
New worlds like Muskeg, that swampy-looking one. More weapons, proximity chat.
Weapon manufacturing, drop pod insertion, faction weapon variants, squad reviving, down but not out.
Banking drones for your loot. It really does sound like Dust 514's potential, fully realized, and then some.
Yeah, much deeper integration and persistence seems to be the goal this time.
Definitely feels like a more complete vision within the EVE universe.
Okay, then the other big reveal, EVE Frontier.
Formerly Project Awakening, the MMO space survival horror RPG, or Mustburger, as they jokingly called it.
That name might stick. It made its debut at Fanfest. The focus here seems different.
Very different. It's about building societies, providing tools and rules, almost like a platform for a game.
Inspired by EVE's own third-party dev scene, they said. Open economy, player-built infrastructure.
It's a fascinating concept. Taking EVE's core sandbox principles and applying them to this survival horror setting. Founder access is live now.
And more details coming at summer gaming events. It's also built on the Carbon engine.
Right, and the tech developed for Frontier is intended to flow back into EVE Online under that EVE Evolved banner.
Speaking of Carbon, they're continuing to open source parts of it.
Spatial audio clustering, the scheduler, more planned, benefits the wider community, but also feeds back into EVE.
And they highlighted the massive Python 3 upgrade for EVE Online. Millions of lines of code.
A huge undertaking, absolutely essential for modernizing the game's core tech. The race car surgery analogy was pretty apt.
Yeah, doing that on a live server sounds terrifying. Paves the way for future upgrades, though.
Critical foundational work for EVE forever.
On the publishing and community side, they did something pretty cool, extending the 10-year sword tradition.
Right, not just for CCP employees now, but also honoring player organizations' alliances over 10 years old. Ceremony at the closing party.
Nice recognition for those long-standing groups. Plus the charity auction, the bigger history wall.
All celebrating the player impact. They highlighted recent events too, the migration, alliance resets, big Titan fights, those moon drill battles.
Shows they're paying attention to the player stories unfolding in the game right now.
The partnership program is growing too, over 200 creators now, and they want to boost the tournament scene.
Modernized tools for organizers, a dedicated Discord channel, making it easier for players to run their own events.
Which is great. EVE has a long history of player-run tournaments.
And other EVE stuff. The board game, EVE, War for New Eden, is shipping in June. First tournament was at Fanfest.
And that new cooperative fleet management game with Titan Forge, dice-based, sounds more casual.
Plus the soundtrack is coming to double vinyl for the collectors out there.
That music deserves it, honestly. Iconic stuff.
And lastly, a really unique project, the foundational poem book.
Yeah, inspired by Norse Smith, capturing EVE legends in history and verse. And they're inviting player contributions.
Another way to sort of immortalize the player-created culture, like the monument.
It's a lovely, creative idea. Shows a real appreciation for the sagas players written themselves over 22 years.
So wrapping it all up, the big picture seems to be this interconnected EVE universe.
Definitely. EVE Online, Vanguard, Frontier, not just separate games, but parts of a shared reality, potentially influencing each other.
Big focus on player empowerment, community driving things, and this long-term EVE Forever vision.
Absolutely. It's ambitious. Building not just games, but a whole ecosystem designed to last, driven by its players.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, if they pull off this deep connection between an MMO, an FPS, and a survival RPG, what does that mean for online worlds?
Yeah, what happens when player actions in one game genre genuinely ripple across into another, within the same persistent universe? It's a fascinating thought experiment for the future of virtual societies.
Definitely something to keep an eye on as all this unfolds. Thanks for digging into the keynote with us.